Imagine this. You just booked an Airbnb for hundreds of dollars. At first, you're excited. The photos look amazing. The host has 5 stars, and you feel like you're about to live like a local. But when you walk in, there's a note waiting for you on the counter. A list of chores. Strip the sheets, wash the dishes, take out the trash. Basically clean the place before you leave. And that's on top of the massive cleaning fee you've already had to pay. That's the reality of Airbnb now. What started as a cheaper, more authentic alternative to hotels has turned into one of the most overpriced and frustrating ways to travel. And people are starting to notice. Social media is flooded with posts complaining about hidden fees, surprise rules, and nightmare stays. Travelers are realizing that the promise of cheap, authentic lodging doesn't really exist anymore. And the backlash has already begun. Cities are cracking down. Guests are walking away, and what was once the future of travel suddenly looks like a company in decline. And you don't have to just take my word for it. Airbnb's financials are showing this strain. In Q1 2025, revenue barely grew just 6%, while profits crashed 42%. In this video, we're going to break down where it all went wrong. From the insane fees, to investors treating condos like hotels, to why the entire experience is completely inconsistent compared to, well, just booking a regular hotel. So where did it start? At the beginning, Airbnb actually made sense. It started in 2008 when 2 guys in San Francisco couldn't afford their rent. So they bought a few air mattresses, rented out their living room to travelers, and called it Air Bed and Breakfast. The pitch was simple. Live like a local, pay less than a hotel, and stay somewhere that actually feels like a home. And for a while, it worked. You could find quirky lofts, cozy spare bedrooms, even tree houses or cabins, often at a fraction of the price of a hotel room. It felt personal, it felt authentic, and it gave travelers a totally new way to see the world. But here's the problem. That was in the past. Airbnb isn't cheap anymore. In fact, half the time it's more expensive than just booking a hotel. A place listed for, say, $120 a night, by the time you actually pay, it's closer to $250.
Airbnb used to be a good thing. I think it was a great alternative to hotels, especially when you have a big group. I can't get over how out of control Airbnb has got with all of the fees. It's not cheaper than hotels anymore.
There's a service fee, a cleaning fee, sometimes even an extra charge just for having more than one guest. And then, when you finally show up, they hand you a list of chores. Strip the sheets, wash the dishes, take out the trash. You're basically paying hotel prices for the privilege of being the maid. And this is the exact opposite of how Airbnb was sold to us. It started as the cheaper, authentic alternative, but today it's overpriced rentals where you do have to work yourself. Hotels who used to look like the expensive option suddenly don't look so bad anymore. And the expense problem only got worse once investors realized how much money they could make. That's where they really lost the plot. Airbnb was supposed to be about regular people renting out a spare bedroom. Instead, it turned into a real estate business. Investors started buying up condos, houses, even entire apartment buildings, treating them like hotels with no regulation and no consistency. In cities like New York, Lisbon, and Barcelona, whole neighborhoods were transformed. Apartments that used to house families got flipped into short-term rentals. Housing availability shrank. Rents skyrocketed, and locals were pushed out. For travelers, it meant the live like a local dream became a joke. And I think that's where Airbnb lost its magic. You didn't feel like you were staying at someone's house living like a local. You felt like you were staying at some big investor's side hustle. And on top of that, then came one of the most frustrating shifts for guests. Surprise fees. Yes, hotels have resort fees, sure, but Airbnb's system took it to another level. And some hosts started inventing their own add-ons.
I've only charged you for the things that you've used.
The washing machine will be charged at £5 per wash. Are you serious?
And unlike hotels, there's no consistent standard. You're at the mercy of whatever rule the host decides to impose. And sometimes the horror stories you hear about Airbnb aren't exaggerations. They're real. Here's one of the most insane reviews that I found online. They say, my one and only Airbnb stay was at a nice condo in Long Beach, California, right on the beach. Once I got home, the host tried to charge me $7,000 for damages that were 100% false. They claimed I broke their refrigerator, TV, and internet, spilled oil on their couch, and stole their bathroom rugs. They also claimed I did drugs in their apartment. Best part? I never met the host. Their housekeeper is the one that let me in. When Airbnb requested photos, they didn't send any. Imagine that. And these types of reviews are all over Airbnb. There's also horror stories of the people renting out their properties having to deal with all these legitimate damages done by the customers.
A beautiful house has been trashed. All the glassware's broken. Pictures are broken. Rubbish galore. Absolute pigs.
All of this confusion and back and forth just led to broken trust. What was supposed to be a cheaper, more flexible alternative to hotels ended up being unpredictable and sometimes even more expensive. And if the price didn't scare you away, the inconsistency probably did. Because unlike hotels where you know exactly what you're walking into, Airbnb has no playbook. Every stay is a roll of the dice. Hotels are safe. A Marriott in Chicago isn't all that different from a Marriott in Miami. The rooms are clean, the check-in process is clear, and the expectations are set. Airbnb, on the other hand, is a total gamble. One stay might be incredible. Thoughtful hosts, spotless rooms, and a local touch. The next could be a nightmare. Broken locks, missing amenities, unclear instructions, or neighbors furious that you're even there. The problem is there's no baseline standard. Everything depends on the individual host, their personality, and how much effort they put in. That sort of unpredictability might have been charming in the early days, but as the prices went up and Airbnb started looking more and more like a hotel alternative, people wanted consistency. And that's where Airbnb just couldn't deliver. But beyond the prices, fees, and inconsistent experiences, there's another big problem. Safety. Unlike hotel where there's staff on site and security protocols in place, Airbnb guests are often left on their own. Some listings have been found with hidden cameras, faulty locks, or even misrepresented locations. There are countless stories of guests arriving only to find that the apartment that they're staying at is a disaster. Sometimes even finding hazards like exposed wiring, broken windows, or unsafe neighborhoods. And if something goes wrong, there's no front desk to complain to. Airbnb support can be slow, and sometimes it's little help at all. What was supposed to feel like a personal, local stay can suddenly feel risky and unpredictable. For many travelers, the thought of being alone in an unfamiliar space with no immediate help is enough to make them question if Airbnb is worth it at all. Here's another one of the craziest reviews that I've come across. Airbnb in Toronto. Sister and I brought our passports. They demanded we forfeit the passports on arrival. We said absolutely not, and after hesitation, were shown to our space. The rooms did not match the picture posted at all. The place reeked of bleach that had been used recently. We took photos of every room and quietly slipped out when no one was watching. Reported everything to Airbnb and were given a full refund. Their ad was removed and host blocked. Seriously believe we narrowly escaped being trafficked that day. Truly crazy. I mean, that's just insane. But here's where the story flips. It wasn't just guests who were fed up. It was entire cities. As investors scooped up entire buildings and turned them into short-term rentals, locals started getting pushed out. Housing that used to belong to residents vanished. Rents spiked, and neighborhoods began feeling more like tourist zones than communities. Streets that once had families and local shops now looked like a revolving door for travelers. And cities started pushing back. New York implemented strict registration rules that effectively banned most short-term rentals in apartment buildings. Barcelona limited the number of nights any property could be rented per year, cracking down on absentee landlords. And the backlash wasn't just legal, it was cultural. Neighborhood associations protested, locals staged rallies, and media outlets began labeling Airbnbs as a threat to housing markets.
On the streets of Barcelona, locals armed with water guns are getting loud. The message to tourists: go home.
What began as a clever idea to let people live like a local had turned into a global headache. Investors were raking in profits, but cities were drawing red lines. And suddenly, Airbnb found itself on the defensive in some of its biggest markets. For travelers, it meant fewer listings in popular cities and stricter rules. For Airbnb, it was a warning. Growth could no longer be endless, and the model that built the company was now under intense scrutiny. And while cities were cracking down, Airbnb's reputation was quietly slipping too. Social media memes started. They painted Airbnb as an unpredictable, expensive mess. The exact opposite of the carefree, live like a local idea that they sold. And on the flip side, hotels started looking better than ever. Unlike Airbnb, hotels deliver consistency. You know what you're gonna get. A clean room, check-ins at any hour, staff to help if something goes wrong. The variability that used to be Airbnb's charm, quirky, personalized stays, suddenly felt just like a gamble. And travelers began asking, why not just book a hotel and avoid all the headaches? Airbnb is still huge, but the shine is wearing off. The company's model, once celebrated as revolutionary, was starting to feel more like a risky alternative than a smart choice. And as more and more people compared it directly to hotels, the cracks became impossible to ignore. In the end, Airbnb shows a simple lesson. Growth and hype can only carry a company so far. And speaking of companies falling off, last week I covered this video on Krispy Kreme, and these comments were my favorite. But please leave your thoughts in the comments below. Maybe you love Airbnb, maybe you've had great experiences, or maybe you've had a nightmare experience like the ones I've mentioned in the video already. Let me know in the comments and I will feature my favorite ones in next week's video. But as always, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.